Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. It's a bit of a maintenance video today. If you've been long time watchers of my channel, you'll know that a few years ago now, and I was a late adopter of this, I bought a Makita plunge saw, track saw. Absolutely fabulous bit of kit, can't believe I left it so long. But it's performed flawlessly, but there's been something that's bugged me slightly about it ever since I've had it. And the time has come where I'm actually going to do something about it. It's all to do with how close the blade is set to the actual edge of the guide rail, and consequently how much of the anti-splinter guard is left on. And the answer to that is not very much. It's really close to the actual aluminium guide rail. So what I want to do here is two things. A, replace the splinter guard, the splinter strip, which I've got here. I think it's a genuine Makita part, 3 meters long, I think, but my guide rail's 1.5. So I'm going to replace that, but at the same time, what I want to do is try and I hope I'm not going to regret it, because obviously these saws are factory set. I'm going to try and move the body of the saw a little bit further out on the actual base of the saw, so it gives me a bit more space between the edge of the track and the edge of the splinter guard. So I'll flip the camera around and show you what I'm talking about. As I said, here's my guide rail, brilliant bit of kit, no problems at all. But as you can see, I know that obviously this splinter guard, you can see it's hanging off here a little bit. This splinter guard does kind of get, eventually as you use it more and more, there becomes more of a gap between the edge of the blade and the splinter guard, which I get. But as you can see here, look, even from the word go, what's that? It's not even a millimetre. It's so close to the edge. And I think what happened up here, I've had a couple of instances perhaps where the blade's bound a little bit, look. And what it's actually done is taken a little bit out of the rail itself. So time has come to put a new splinter guard on. But what I wanted to do was see if I could adjust the saw. Now here's the saw, great, brilliant bit of kit. Really looked after it, I haven't dropped it or banged it or anything. It cuts really beautifully, no problems. And I hope it's not a case of if it end broke, don't fix it. But when we look on the underside of the saw, we can see here that we've got these 4 screws here. And these are what adjusts or fixes the body of the saw to the base of the saw. Now, as you can see quite clearly here, look, they are set further this way than that way. Same here, look. So I'm pretty confident if I loosen off those screws, the base can move this way, which will give a bit more space between sort of the edge of the base and the saw blade, and consequently leave me a bit more splinter guard. So I know with the Festool, it's an easier proposition because those fixing screws are, you can get to them from the top. Obviously there's no way of doing this here, so I think what I'm going to have to possibly do is take just enough tension off them to move them over, and then get the saw. I haven't got the proper clamps here, so I'll probably either clamp it down on the ends, or I might even, I know it sounds criminal, but I might even put a screw through to hold this down, get it set up, and then see if we can adjust the blade back so it's in the right position. As I said in my previous video, these saws, they don't move down the track parallel to the track. They've got a very slight toe out at the back or toe in at the front, and it's only a tiny amount. It's only the thickness of a bit of cardboard. So that is the critical part of setting these up. So let's go for it. I think, get this, I've got a bit of timber here that I can use to cut. I think I might just do a couple of test cuts to make sure that it is set right. I know it is, and then we know we can replicate that, and then we'll do the adjustment on the saw, see if we can get it over. If I'm happy with how it's cutting, then we can put the new splinter guard on. So let's go. Right, so as I said, haven't clamped this down. It's just going to hold itself into position. What I'm going to do first is plunge the saw in. I've set the guide rail sort of a couple of mil from the edge. I'm going to plunge the saw in. Right, what that does is it shows the toe of the saw. So obviously the front cut will be slightly closer towards the rail than the back cut, and then I'll bring the saw back up behind that cut and overlap the front from where the rear was, and we should be able to see that step. So let's just quickly do that. What I'll do is I'll put batteries on, because it's not good for them if you run them without batteries. Let's do that. Obviously, always important if you're doing any work on a saw that involves working around the blade, take the batteries out. Also, the one thing I will say, I've obviously adjusted these thumb screws so there's no play in the track itself. So let's try that again. So there we've got a very slight step there, so let's bring the saw behind. So there we go. I know you might think there's a little bit of burning, but the blade could do with being replaced. But if we now have a look here, look, and again, this is just like the last video I did. Here you can clearly see, look, there's a little step. There's a little step in the cut, and that is about the thickness of a bit of card. You know, I don't know exactly what the measurement is, but you can see that that's the difference between that was the back of the blade and this is the front of the blade. Now again, I'm not going to do it because I did it in my last video, but if I was to now push that saw all the way through, as it got to sort of here, that step would disappear. In fact, let's do it. Let's do it. I can do it. Let's go. Here we go. And there you go. You can just see the witness mark, but obviously that's gone from a step there to back to flush there. So we know that saw's set up straight, set up towing in the right amount. So hopefully when we readjust it, we can redo this test and we should get the same result. So let's attack those screws under there now. Right, here they are, look. So, you can see those, can you see those? Let's get, I think it's a Phillips number 2 screwdriver. Let's crack those off and see what happens. So yeah, it might only seem a subtle difference, but the difference between a Phillips and a posi is quite important with screws like this, because what we don't want to be doing is mashing their heads up on these screws. So here we go. Yeah, there's no other really way to do it. I've just got to loosen them off and see. They're not actually monster tight. So let's just loosen them off a little bit and see. Probably saw will never be the same after I've done this, but hey ho. Right, now what we should be able to do, I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to zoom it in a bit. We should be able to move this body of the saw over. Let's have a look, shall we? There you go, look at that, look. Can you see that? So we've got lots of lovely movement there. So I don't want to go mad because I don't want it to be too much of the splinter guard left over. So I think I'm just going to kind of aim to put the screws more centrally in the recess in the base. So let's do that there. Lock that off. I think I'll lock that off a bit. There we go. And then we've got the back. Let's zoom that back out. Here we go, come on. You just see the back ones there. Look at this. My camera skills are absolutely amazing, aren't they? I know you're all amazed. Right, so what we'll do on the back one here, let's loosen that off. And obviously, look, that's got to move out a tiny bit more. I'm really judging this by, but there we go. Let's lock that off. Again, this is where the Makita is at a disadvantage to the Festool, because the Festool you can put in the track, put your little card spacer in the back, and then lock them down from the top. Whereas here, you've got to hope there's enough tension on these screws so that you can still adjust it slightly, carefully take it back off the track, and then tighten these up. But anyway, I'll get this guide in the right place now, so I'm happy that it's not going to move, and then we'll do a test cut and see where we're at. Right, so we're all set up again. I haven't clamped this down. I'm just going to see, generally, this is nice clean plywood here, and the underside of this rail is nice and clean. I've never had any problems with it moving, so I'm going to try it without clamping it down, and if there's a problem then I will clamp it down, but so we're back to where we were. We'll put the saw on, we'll plunge it in, and we'll see where we're at. Just put my extraction on, because why not? Right, here we go. again, just quickly, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to drop the saw in a little bit further, because the more of the blade that goes down through the material, the more it sort of accentuates the toe on the blade. So obviously, old habits die hard. Straight away, I've set that a couple of mil in from the edge, but obviously it needs to be further now. So if we go, I'm looking for a couple of mil of splinter guard to be left, and then a couple of mil of material to be cut off. So that's about 4 or 5 mils. Let's try that again. There's the back of our cut. Let's see where we're at. Right, so straight away I can see we're not far off. We're really not. I mean, there's a tiny lip there, but I think it's just a little bit too big. So I think what I'm going to try and do is just adjust the back of the saw out a little bit. Is that right? Oh no, in a bit. Sorry, I've got to adjust it. I've got to adjust the back in. Oh, yeah, I've got to adjust the back of the saw in, because obviously this was the back of the saw, so that's got to go in a little bit. So I'll do that now, and then we'll have another go. Right, so I've loosened them off, just pushed it over a bit more. Tiny bit more pressure on. Let's have a look. Okay, here we go. Set up. I can already feel that's wrong because it's binding. So what I'm going to show you here is in the same way that if I wanted the saw to go out a little bit, I just use this screwdriver. Again, leaving tension on these screws. I use this screwdriver to in a very controlled manner, move it over. Now I want to move it back. I'm going to do almost the opposite look, and I've got a much smaller screwdriver, which I'm going to put in between the recess in the base and that screw. And if I turn it a tiny amount, in fact, if I do it in this one, look, we'll see it move on that one. No, we'll do it the other way. Sorry, I'll do it in this one and watch it move in that one. If I twist the screwdriver a tiny amount, it should, just by a tiny bit, look, hang on, it should, there, look, can you see? That moved that a tiny amount. We'll just clamp that screw back down and then give it another go. Right, so after a few attempts, I think I've got it just about spot on. What basically I found was sort of the easiest way to do it, actually, forget this big screwdriver, was pretty much put the right amount of tension on these screws and then use this small screwdriver actually in one side if it needs to go out and the other side if it needs to go in. And what I've actually done is I loosened these two screws off and pushed the base as far across outwards as it would go, and actually adjusted the toe correctly on the front. So again, just a simple case of putting enough tension on there, running it a few times up and down until we get exactly the toe that we need. And I'm just going to quickly make a new cut on the edge of this and show you that overlap the same as what we had before we started. So as I said, pretty much the same as before. What you can see we've got now is, look, just this nice little step. It's not even the thickness of a business card, actually. It's sort of thicker than paper, but not quite as thick as card. And obviously that's all you need. And what that enables the back of the blade to do, and I'll just push this down here. what it does when you're cutting, I can't keep it down and film at the same time, but it keeps the back part of the blade away from the cut, if that makes sense. So as the saw's moving down, the front is cutting up against the splinter guard, but the back is not touching that cut and deforming it, because obviously the back of the saw's slightly away. So yeah, so what I'll do now is I'll just quickly finish that off like I did before. And like before, you can see where the back of the blade was as it moves forward to come in line where the front of the blade was. Obviously that's nice and smooth. So really happy that's done. That's adjusted. I'll just nip it back upside down, take it back upside down, nip those screws up, and then we'll put the new splinter guard on. Yeah, just give them a little crank. Don't want them coming undone. There we go. As I said, you pay a lot more money for the Festool, but the adjustment process is much easier on the Festool because you can get to those screws from the top. But anyway, let's get this old strip off the bottom of here, clean this up and fit the new one, and then do a test cut and see how much splinter guard I've got left. Here it goes, off she comes. There we go. So what we've got left on here, some awful sticky residue. And we're going to get that off. Let's have a look. I'm going to peel off. No. Going to have to get some sort of tool to see if we can get that off. So this stuff doesn't want to come off. So I think what I'm going to do is just hit it with some heat to start with. Just see what happens there. Should loosen it all up. Obviously I want the new splinter guard to have a nice, the best possible chance of gluing. So yeah, that's loosening that up now. Right, I'm bored of this now. Right, bored of rolling it by hand. I'm going to use the toffee wheel. Let's see what's in here. I need to clamp it down, don't I? Of course I do. I found a winning combination is lots of heat and the toffee wheel. So it's turning into an awful job. I thought this would be a 5-second job. Anyway, let's get it off. A little bit of isopropyl alcohol. Okay. Finally, that's clean. What I've noticed, obviously perhaps where I've not been quite as careful, I should have been putting this guide rail down, is there's just, if you look here, you've got a tiny little burr on the end there, so I'll just file that off, check the other end, and then we'll, I think we're ready to put the new strip on. Just roll that out to you. I think what I'll do, just to aid adhesion, is just warm it all up a little bit. Always sticks better when it's warm. Right, here we go. Just go tight up to that. Obviously a little edge on the back there. Hopefully fairly idiot-proof putting this on. Straight up to that edge of the sort of notch. There we go. That's it. Get that pushed down nice and firm. What I found with the other one is it started to just flick off at the ends, and I think the old splinter guard was slightly past, so I'm going to make sure it was slightly past the guide rail, so I'm going to make sure I cut this back so the splinter guard is slightly behind the guide rail so it won't catch on anything. But yeah, I'll see what I've got. Perfect thing for this little roller. pretty good. Lovely. Right, just get my knife. So as I said, I think I'm just going to cut the edge back slightly. Less chance of it getting caught then and ripping. Right, I think that's it. Excellent. So all we need to do now is plunge our saw into it. I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to nip and get a brand new blade because I want this first cut to be spot on. Right, I'm back. My local tool station is not very far away. I got this Trend blade. What is it? 40 tooth. Perfectly acceptable for most of the work I do. Pretty cheap actually. 16 quid including that. And while I'm there, I've got another one of these cheap sort of contractor blades for my little Makita saw because I think they're only a tenner including that. So let's chuck this into here and then make this cut. New blade's fitted. I think I'm going to set the blade up a little bit so it's not on maximum depth. Put it up so it's about, I don't know, 5 or 10 mil out the bottom of the material, and then let's make our cut. I think, what should I do? Yeah, I think I'll do, rather than go all the way through, I think I'll do my test cut to make sure that the toe's right, and at the same time as cutting the splinter guard. So let's go. Oh, that's so much nicer. Right, we'll start back here. Right, there we go. Now I know I've already showed you this, and I know I'm repeating myself, but we can clearly see here, look, that we've got this lovely little step where that's the front part of the blade as it's coming through, and obviously that was where the back part of the blade was. So again, I'll do it. Let's do it again. As you bring the saw through, that step will disappear. There we go. As you can see, as the front of the saw basically came from the back of the cut back to where the front of the cut was, it obviously cleaned out that slight offset. So that's absolutely brilliant. And what we're more interested in is how much actual splinter guard I've got left. And the fact is, look, I've got much more. Look, got a good, what's that? Got to be a couple of mil, maybe 3 mil. So that's mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, as I said, I know that this will gradually get sort of eaten back a little bit, but I'm much more accurate, and the saw blade is further away from the actual guide rail. So yeah, finally got there. Yeah, happy about that. So there you go. That's that video. It felt potentially in my mind, I thought it'd be smoother than that in terms of what I was doing. It felt a bit chaotic, and to be honest, I've never done this before. I knew what I was trying to achieve, and potentially you've come along with me on my learning curve. I think how initially I thought I'd do it, end up doing it slightly differently. So, but ultimately all it matters is the end result. And the key thing here, I know that I wanted to get a bit more splinter guard, which I've done. But the key thing in terms of lining up this Makita is to make sure that the back of the blade isn't in the same line as the front of the blade. And issues you might have if they are is when you come out of the cut, if the blade is pretty much parallel with the track, when you come out of the cut, you find the back tends to burn the workpiece. So again, I don't exactly know what the measurement is, and doesn't have to be much, but you can see as I made that cut repeatedly, we're looking for that slight offset between the front of the blade and the back of the blade. If you get that, it's only got to be a small amount. It keeps the back of the blade off the workpiece and gives you a nice clean cut. So there you go. I hope you found the video interesting. There's potentially bits of it that are more interesting than the others. And it did actually take me by surprise how difficult it was to change that splinter guard. But there we go. That's that done. Finally, it's a job that I've been meaning to do ever since I've had this saw, and I've done it now. So I hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching.